Hey guys, hope you've all had a good week. Miss you all. I just want to connect with you today and give you some encouragement from God's Word and from a few other places. I'm going to preface all of this by saying this week I don't have any funny videos. I don't kind of have any kind of humorous things to tie everything in. I trust you guys have been finding ways to stay joyful in all of this, that you've found things to entertain you and to just really encourage you through all of this. But this week, I want to be a little bit more serious, and I want to share something with you that's been on my heart. And hopefully, you'll be encouraged by it, and hopefully, this can be used to encourage you to draw closer to God. So, I'm just going to go ahead and dive in. About a year ago, I kind of found myself in a bit of a rough patch. I had a lot of questions, I had a lot of kind of unknown factors in life. I was dealing with a fair amount of anxiety and uncertainty. There was so many things that were completely out of my control, and I really just felt isolated and really just no control whatsoever. And I was just really kind of in a bit of a rough spot. And a very close friend of mine gave me a book, and I actually want to share some of it with you today. The book is called You'll Get Through This. It's by Max Lucado, and it says, "Hope and help for your turbulent times." And this friend that gave me this book, he really had my back, and this was one of the ways that I was just really encouraged, even in some really tough circumstances. And what I want to share with you guys today actually comes from chapter 9 of this book. The chapter title is called A Splash of Gratitude with That Attitude, Please. And the premise of the chapter is really a call to pause, take a step back, and look for things in life to be thankful about. You know, I don't know where you guys are right now in all of this. We've just kind of come through the first month of all of this separation, and I hope you're doing well. I've been praying for you guys. I don't know where you're at. I don't know how much longer we're going to be in this situation. You can listen to the news. You can, try to keep up to date, but that number seems to be changing every day. So this idea of looking for things to be thankful for, regardless of our circumstances, and in doing so, we can be encouraged, no matter how bleak things seem to be. So I've been thinking over the last couple of days, what are some things that I'm thankful for? What are some things that, even based on the current situation of the world, what are things that I can be thankful for? First thing that pops into my head is I'm very thankful for my family. Not just my wife and Ainsley, who I have just been so beside myself just with the extra time that I've been able to spend with them. But I'm thankful for how this whole situation has actually made opportunities for a lot of families to become closer. This is a terrible thing to admit, but I'm pretty sure I've talked to my family more in the last couple of weeks than I have in the last couple of months. Simply because with all of this extra time and not really knowing what to do with some of it, I find myself texting my parents or talking with my brother and sister-in-law. It's really interesting to stop and think about all of the positives in a situation. I know that seems like a very simple thing to do, to say, oh, you're bummed out, well, look on the bright side. It's not that simple, though. I definitely recognize that in tough, dark times, it's very difficult to look at the bright side and to stop and think of all the things that we can be thankful for. But it's so important, because when we stop and we start to think of the things that we can be thankful for, we begin to see all of the little things that God does in our lives, and every little thing that He's done to make us who we are as we seek to follow Him. And I want to read just one paragraph from Max Lucado's book in this chapter, and this is what he says. Gratitude gets us through the hard stuff. To reflect on your blessings is to rehearse God's accomplishments. To rehearse God's accomplishments is to discover His heart. To discover his heart is to discover not just good gifts, but the good giver. Gratitude always leaves us looking at God and away from dread. It does to anxiety what the morning sun does to valley mist. It burns it up. And I think it's so cool how he laid all that out. This kind of progression of where gratitude takes us. To reflect on our blessings, to reflect on the things that we can be thankful for, is to list everything that God has accomplished and everything that God has done for you. And when we begin to list all of the things that he's done for us, we begin to see his heart and we begin to see his love for us in providing all of those things. And then when we discover his heart and his love for us, we don't just think of all of the good things that we have, all of the good gifts we've been given, but we think about God who's given them to us. So when we stop and begin to be thankful for things, it takes our mind off of the negative that's surrounding us, and it draws us to think about God a little bit more. You know, I've been encouraging you guys over the last number of weeks to take the opportunity to draw closer to God in this situation. And we do that by being in his word and by spending time in prayer and by getting to know him. But a great way to do that is to stop and simply start by looking for things to be thankful for. As we find things to be thankful for, we realize all of those awesome things that God has done for us. And as we realize all the awesome things that God has done for us, we realize just how much he loves us. When we realize how much he loves us, then we retrospectively look at all the things we have, and we don't just see gifts that he's given us. We see the fact that he loved us enough to give them to us. And in that full circle moment, simply looking for a small thing to be thankful for now has us thinking about God. And that's where our focus goes. So I want to encourage you guys with that this week. You know, when we think of all of the craziness in life, you know, a verse that we tend to kind of gravitate to is in Romans chapter 8, where it says, all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. But, you know, often our definition of good and God's definition of good are two very different things. We may look at a situation and think, how on earth could anybody perceive that as good? But from God's perspective, it is the best situation for us to be in that moment so that we can grow closer to him and so that we can be drawn into a deeper relationship with him. And you know, a perfect example of being thankful and having gratitude really be the focus and regardless of our situations, a great example is the story of Joseph. You know, Joseph was a guy who loved God, who wanted to honor him with his life. And you know what happened to him? His brothers, who should have had his back, beat him up, threw him in a pit, and then sold him into slavery. Then, while he was in slavery, his boss's wife accused him of attempting to seduce her, so then his boss had him thrown in prison. Then, when he was in prison, he was able to interpret some dreams to his cellmates, and one of his cellmates was released and completely forgot about Joseph and left him in that prison. So when we start Joseph's life, you know, he's in a huge family, he loves God, and he's trying to honor him with his life. And then progressively we see his life go from bad to worse to worst. And it just keeps on kind of building up all of the negative things that are happening in his life. And through all of that, he continues to say, I can't sin against God. He's been too faithful to me. Because Joseph stopped and was grateful for the little things that God had done for him. And you know what happens to Joseph? Eventually, he becomes second in command over the entire nation. And then he ends up being the instrument that God uses to spare thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people from a 7-year famine. And when Joseph, at the end of all this situation, meets his brothers again, who beat him up and sold him into slavery, they think he's dead. And here he is standing before them, and he reveals that, hey, it's me, it's Joseph. And they're all terrified because they're thinking, this guy's life has only gone from bad to worse he's got to be angry and he's going to take it out on us. And instead, what Joseph says is, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. Guys, regardless of the situations that we find ourselves in, if we stop and we begin to be thankful for the little things, and we begin to kind of pile up that list of things that we can be thankful to God for, we can have a totally different perspective on all of this. Yeah, the world's crazy right now. Yeah, we're isolated. Yeah, things are just, really, really going downhill. But you know what? God's on the throne. God's going to work this out for his definition of good, not ours. So in the meanwhile, as easy as it is to get bogged down with negative thoughts and negative feelings and all of this, let's look for little things to be thankful for. And as we begin to think about those things, we begin to think more about God. And as we begin to think more about God, we draw closer to God. So my encouragement to you this week is simply this. What are you thankful for today? It's a simple thought. What are you thankful for? But as we dig down that rabbit hole of things that we can be thankful for, we begin to discover God in a new and a fresh way. I want to read this paragraph for you one more time. It says, gratitude gets us through the hard stuff. To reflect on your blessings is to rehearse God's accomplishments. To rehearse God's accomplishments is to discover his heart. To discover his heart is not just to see good gifts, but the good giver. Gratitude always leaves us looking at God and away from dread. It does to anxiety what the morning sun does to valley mist. It burns it up. So let's seek to be thankful this week. And as we focus on what God's done for us, as we begin to focus on who he is and think about that, my prayer for you this week is that whatever anxiety you're dealing with, it gets burnt up in light of who God is. Love you guys. Can't wait to see you next. Praying for you. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. Stay safe. We'll see you soon.